In a way, it all started from the title. When I first came to Mousehole, there were lots of cats in the village, and there was something about the idea of a cat that lived in a place called Mousehole, which amused me, and I thought it would amuse the readers. There was also this legend about a fisherman called Tom Bocock, who went out when there was a great storm and caught 7 kinds of fish. And I quite wanted to do that, but couldn't at first see how. And then it occurred to me that if I gave him a cat and told it from the cat's point of view, that it would make a marvellous book for children. Well, the story sort of simmered in my head for about 2 years before it was ready. But once it came to the boil, then I sort of sat and wrote it in a couple of weeks, and it just came right from the very beginning. The idea of the storm cat came one night when I was in bed. There was a terrible storm going on outside, and I could hear what I thought was a cat howling outside. When I got close to the window, I realized it was the wind coming through the cracks, and I thought to myself, oh, it's just a storm cat. When it came to the illustrations, I knew that Nicola Bailey was the ideal person to do it. And I was anxious that she should show Mousehole as it is, so that the readers could recognize the places in the book. I used my cottage for Tom's cottage because the way it's situated, it just works perfectly for the illustrations.
Antonia very kindly said I could go and stay in her house in Mousehole so that I could get the atmosphere of a tabby cat, because of course tabbies have waves in their fur, and transferring a tabby cat into blues and greens, she just looked like the sea anyway. I used as a model for the storm cat my own cat Bella, who actually by then was about 19 years old, so it was her last modelling job for me. And I used a friend's cat to model for Mauser. The illustrations in my books are always the size you see them in the books. I sort of need to work the same size as they're going to appear so that I know exactly what the finished thing is going to look like. I use a technique of stippling, really, building up the colour. I might do a wash to start with if it's a large area, but then I stipple on top to get that sort of texture. I use my old box of paints that I've actually had since I was a child. I don't quite know, perhaps it's a magic box, but they just don't seem to run out. It's the same old set. They're watercolours, and I use quite a fat brush that goes to a very fine point. When I'm really working hard, I can perhaps finish a painting in 3 weeks. That's really getting on with it all the time, all day, and I work into the night too. The animation team asked me to do 2 extra pictures because there were a couple of scenes that weren't actually illustrated. You needed to be inside the boat to see Tom actually at the helm. And I had to do a picture of Tom lying in bed with Mauser.
Using computers to do the Mousehole cat means that we can actually get very close to the fine detail that you see in Nicola Bailey's original illustrations. The first process was to actually scan in all her illustrations and decide which parts of the scenes we wanted to animate. Most of the character animations are done traditionally using a traditional animator who does keyframes by hand, which we then take back into the computer and colour up. Other elements, the elements like rain or the sea, lots of those elements are actually done on the computer using some of the wonderful techniques to bring those things to life. Characters are particularly difficult to do on computer because the movements that computers give you isn't really very naturalistic. Tom in this scene is going to yawn, so the animator's actually given us 7 keyframes to animate, and then we colour them up using textures which we pull off of Nicola Bailey's original illustrations. Okay, so once all little patch sequences have been coloured, we can then animate them so that they play as movies. Move it into position so it looks right, and there we go.
When I first saw the drawings animated, I simply couldn't believe it. I was just shown a very short little sequence of about sort of half a minute, And it was as if the book had come to life. It was extraordinary. There was the picture that I'd painted, and a seagull flew across the front of it. I couldn't believe it. We were all breathtaken.